interesting times. In my experience with my dad and our limited work that we've done, the integrity is such a critical part. In fact, it can be your competitive advantage in many places. So question, why do we have to learn the financial part of businesses? It's very similar to the same thing on personal finances. Why do we have to understand the personal finances part? In fact, with businesses, I find it's just an extension, a much more detailed part of our individual finances. We talked about costs. You guys remember as we worked on the budget, you guys had to come up, the first line was kind of your fixed costs and your variable costs. What are your variable costs? Bella, what were variable costs?
Things that like change.
That change. And you know what, it's kind of the same way in your business. Something that varies according to how many products you sell would be your variable cost. For example, if you're selling automobiles, variable cost would include your tires and would include your engine and those things. Again, you produce more cars, you'll use more tires. This stuff is often called cost of goods sold. It's the variable cost, the labor required to produce something, the materials required, anything that varies with the amount of production. So those are called our variable costs. And then you have the fixed costs. And these are the things that are steady regardless of how much you produce. You have to have the factory. So you've got rent, you've got electricity, you've got air conditioning. These are the things that don't vary. So also salaries, utilities, insurance. As business owners, you've got to be very careful about taking on additional fixed costs because those all have to be covered regardless of the amount that you produce. Taxes, we're all familiar with those. Our goal is to pay all that we owe and not a penny more. So we need to make sure we understand those two. And then we have margins. So what's the difference? What is the difference between profit, net profit, and gross profit? You've heard those in your business classes. And again, profit, the money a business keeps after costs, often called expenses, after cost, after variable, after fixed, after taxes, everything. So it's called sales revenue minus all your costs equal your profit. Now, we calculate gross profit being sales revenue minus your variable costs gives you your gross profit. And so we divide our expenses into two sides. So gross profit, then we've got net profit too. And then what's net profit is really just sales revenue minus your variable costs minus your fixed costs. So the nice thing about this is once you understand your gross and your net profit, you get to know what it's doing. And to make it even more useful, you put it in terms of a margin. You put it in terms of 100%. So you have your net profit margin. It tells you about what's the profitability of your business. So for example, gross profit margin, sales revenue divided by variable costs divided by sales revenue. So what did you get to keep after your variable costs are used? And that's your gross profit margin. Why is it important? It helps you figure out, are you on track for making money? So gross profit margin, again, those varies industry to industry. So it's important to understand that ratio. And then you have your net profit margin, which is the same thing, but now you subtract variable minus your fixed cost. And again, it's all over your total revenue. So you tell me what your net profit margin is, and it helps me know how well you're doing. It tells you the percent of money that you get could be reinvested in the business or returned to you as the business owner. So gross profit margin is important, but net profit one is the one that really makes a difference. Okay, light installer. Charges $250 to install lights on your home. Variable costs are $80 for labor, $45 for the Christmas lights and hooks, for a total of $125. What's the gross profit margin and the gross profit for the job? Gross profit margin 50%, is that pretty good? Kind of depends on the industry. In some industries, that would be wonderful. Some industries, it would be pretty tight. Now let's do net profit margin. He's got fixed cost. He's got to pay the truck. He's got gas. He's got insurance. He's got rent on his place. That's 50 per job. So what is his net profit margin? So 250 minus 125 minus 50. He's got a 30% net profit margin. So he's making about 30% of everything, of his revenue. He gets to keep that much. He can reinvest that in the business. So how do you know if it's good? What's a good gross and what's a good net profit margin? Again, this is very general, but gross profit margins around 50% and net profit margins that are around 10% or greater. Again, why are principles so important? And principles help us just really to understand. Again, you can make a lot of mistakes at the margins if you get the principles right. Again, Elder Bednar said, the answers are always in the doctrines and the principles. And the doctrines and the principles need to be in us. So again, as we follow the principles of successful businesses, and very similar to the principles of being successful in our personal finances, that we can do well. So let's talk about key strategy principles. Number one, solve an unmet need. You got to have something that people are willing to pay for. That's the challenge. So how do you do that? Again, you look around, you talk. Potential customers, you can assess the demand. I'd like to test your idea with lots of different people. And again, take into account the changes going on around you, because there's lots of changes going on. This is my nephew's son. He was trying to make additional money. He was looking for something people needed to do, didn't like to do, and pay others to do. He was 15 when he started this business. He's 17 now. He's getting ready to go on a mission. So he started a solar panel washing business. People didn't like, do you think people like to get, especially older people like me, like to get on roofs? No. So he would use Google Earth to look up an address, count the number of solar panels, and then multiply it times his charge. He charged $7 per panel. His average house is 12 panels, brings in 84 per job, takes him 1 hour per house, and he does 2 houses a week. Costs him $8 per house for chemicals, ionized water, and soft glass. His fixed costs are about $20. Ladders, safety equipment, cleaning cloths, and transportation. What is his gross profit, and net profit after 1 month of work? So let's just start. Sales revenue, 4 weeks, times 2 houses, times $84. So in a month, he can bring in about $672. Variable costs, 4 weeks times 2 houses times 8, 64. Fixed cost, $20. And whether you do this over 4 weeks or you do it 1 house at a time, the numbers are still the same, but it still helps us. So his gross profit is 608. Net profit is 448. Gross profit margin is what? 90%. Now, are there lots of businesses like this? No. But I thought it was a unique business just because it's a 15-year-old kid came up with it. Net profit margin, 67%. Not a bad job for a high school kid. So differentiate your business. Make it different. What's your competitive advantages? Why are you doing this? Part of that is praying. Heavenly Father, help me to work beyond my natural abilities. Help me, I can do a good job here. My dad was in construction after the war. He was building chapels. Then he decided to build houses, and then he realized that he really couldn't differentiate himself. And so what did he do? He started building marinas. And then he found out he's really good at building marinas. Also, he could hire his kids. So again, what's your competitive advantage? So he combined his skill in building marinas with the fact that people could trust him. What can you do better than the next business? So you have to figure out what is your advantage and what are you going to do there? And then start small, think big. First, create a job for yourself. my business that I talked about with my sign business. Started with a job for myself, then I started bringing some people in, but I realized that I couldn't scale it. There's not a lot of demand for signs. So start with yourself, understanding your business, managing others, and then managing industry. There's a lot of important parts. And then buy low, sell high. You got to find something you can make a profit at. It's got to be useful. You've got 2 transactions in every sale. You got to purchase the product, and then you've got to sell it. So make sure you understand all the pieces. The example we used today, in the previous class too, you need to understand all of the costs. And the challenge is a lot of times we don't understand all of the costs until we actually get out and do it. So I found it in my times when I'm working on business, it's usually more expensive than I thought. Today, yesterday when we were in Costco, watching that guy go pick mangoes. He went into the Costco, a brand new pallet had come in, and he probably had half the pallet already. But he had picked out, he knew exactly when the mangoes came in, he was there picking out the best ones because he was doing it. And he knew that if he bought it at Costco, he could buy it in bulk. My guess is he had already checked out each of the other Costcos too, so he knew which one had the best fruit. Too. But again, if you can buy it at a low cost, then pass it on to others, it reduces your overall costs. So shop around and negotiate. It's really important that you use multiple suppliers too. Because what happens if one supplier starts raising prices on you? Then you're kind of stuck. And so you need to, again, get multiple suppliers. And hopefully you can purchase in bulk and get a discount. Understand what the payment terms are for your industry, where you're working. And again, ideally, you want to use other people's money. You want to let the suppliers fund your cash flow, and then you pay them at the end of every sales cycle. So what are the principles? Solve an unmet need. Differentiate your business. Start small, think big. Buy low, sell high. Use multiple suppliers and negotiate positive payment terms. It's just interesting to see that entrepreneurial finance is really just an extension of what you're doing in your personal finances. The same principles of keeping good records, being diligent, developing good habits, the same principles and habits that you needed to be successful in your personal finances are the things that will help you be successful in your entrepreneurship experiences too. So our takeaways here is just remember your integrity is the most important thing. Don't ever compromise your integrity for money or for any other thing. It's once you lose your integrity, it's very hard, if ever, to get it back. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you coming.